according to this computer. So, well, thanks for joining us today for Productive Agent Podcast. We have a really special guest today. We have Ann Atkin from it's Meth Mob-Decontamination Specialist. No, we're not going to give you a spelling test on that, and we're not going to make you say 3 times real fast, right?
Right.
But I met Ann a couple of weeks ago at I think we've actually met before in the past, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, I mean, so, but Ann was teaching a CE class, and boy, what an enlightening class. I mean, I knew some mechanics about meth and real estate, but Ann really takes it deeper than, what we know as, 1.0 or greater. I mean, so, 1.0 or less. So she really takes it, so she's got some information here that just really enlightening information. So we'll get started. So first, Ann, tell us a little more about you. How long have you been doing meth cleanup?
I'm glad you at least said how long you've been doing meth cleanup, because usually it's how long have you been doing meth.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I started Meth Mob 7 years ago in June.
Oh,
so
wow.
we're almost 7 years old.
Okay.
And before that, I was partners in a cleaning company, and I just had somebody come to me and they went, "You want to buy our meth cleaning business?" And honestly, Rob, I've never really had to deal with meth. Knock on wood. No, I haven't had to touch my family, and all I really knew about it was, what I saw on TV and in the parks and that. And so I started doing some research because I went, oh, maybe it'll be an interesting sideline for our cleaning business. And the more research I did, the more I went, holy smokes, I'm gonna do meth full time. And so I started Meth Mob then, and been doing it ever since. It's 100% of what we do. Just meth cleanup is all we do. And again, I never knew it existed. And unfortunately, that's what most of my clients run into. It they get shocked by it with that home inspection test, and they're like, what? Because nobody ever talks about it, but it's pretty prevalent out there, unfortunately. Did that help?
Yeah, you had some really cool stats that I thought were cool. So would you care to share some of that? Or?
Sure. I can give you some that are nationwide, some that are Utah specific.
Sure.
So a nationwide stat is that 1 in 10 houses has meth in it.
Wow, and 10%.
10%. And in Utah, we're in the top 10% of use per capita.
Lovely.
I know. Well, we like our 10% number, right? And so right. I think that our number is probably higher than 1 in 10. I don't do a lot of pre-testing. I really push the pre-clearance, the pre-testing to home inspectors, because they're already in the houses. They're a little less expensive than I am. But depending upon the home inspector that I'm talking to, and I cover the whole state, so I deal with a lot of home inspectors. They'll tell me between 1 in 3 houses and 1 in 8. So it's probably somewhere right in there on our pre-clearance testing at Meth Mob. We're probably about 1 in 8.
1 in 8 houses in Utah. So yeah, 1 in 8. Wow.
It's. I don't think we think of it. I think in general it's easy for us to go, well, what does a Breaking Bad house look like? That's what we think of as a meth house.
Right.
Instead of the house that they've helped somebody out. And unfortunately, it's epidemic in Utah. The number 1 and 2 used drugs in Utah right now are meth and heroin. and it's so prevalent.
So whatever happened to beer?
We're old school, Rob. We're just old school. But if you go back to that, at our age, back in the day, beer was the thing, and you'd have parties with your friends, and I go, kids are still doing that now. They just have different drugs. So when we were having a party when our parents went out of town, kids are still doing the same thing today, but but they're using other things besides beer.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's the kind of stuff that contaminates houses. And most people don't realize that it's smoking that's contaminating our houses in Utah. It's not a lab.
No, my understanding, it's too, south of the border is where most of it's manufactured. And it's a lot easier because, I mean, you pointed out that the materials you need to get are so hard to get
Yeah.
here in the US anyway, where
Yep.
south of the border, it's just, black market stuff. There's so much money involved that, from
Yep.
my understanding, that it's just easier to do it there because, it's, the police are paid off or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such big business.
It is. It is. And honestly, if you have friends or family that are police officers and you ask them about meth, they'll tell you we're shipping it all in from Mexico right now. In Utah,
Right.
that's we're a user state, not a maker state.
Well, that's
Which is shifted.
yeah, because they used to when it was easier to get the chemicals, there was a lot of labs.
Yeah, yep, there was. And I think that's what people think now is, oh, I only need to test this house if if it looks like there's been a lab here.
Right.
And boy, that is not the houses that have meth in it. It is
No, if 1 in 8,
it,
1 in 8 houses, holy crap.
yeah, yeah. Every well, let me give you another stat that's kind of an interesting one. The health department says for every person that is homeless or in rehab as a result of meth, there's 20 contaminated houses in the wake, in the history of that person.
Wow.
Because what happens with meth, it is very psychologically addicting. It creates all this dopamine in your brain that makes you feel good. And so consequently, once you start using meth, your brain stops producing dopamine on its own. So when somebody goes off of meth, they're really in despair. And the stats on meth are within the first 2 years, 85% of the users go back to meth. It's a crazy.
I mean, if they rehabbed.
Yeah. Yeah. They
so
fall
85%. What is it?
80,
what do they call that?
recidivism rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, 85%. So for that person that's maybe taken them 5 times to get on the wagon.
Right.
And maybe they're on the wagon now, but when they're off the wagon, what happens is the spouse kicks them out, or the brother or sister, or whatever, and then they go to their friends and family, and somebody crashes on your couch for a month, and you mooch off of your coworker a little bit, and then after everybody's kicked you out, and right before you're homeless, you go hit up grandma.
Right.
And you always land someplace, again, before you're homeless, before you're at the end. And so all of those homes where they have fallen off the wagon and done some smoking in there, and they tried really good, and maybe they've been on the wagon most of it, but some of it they haven't, that ends up being a contaminated house.
Wow.
And meth doesn't off gas, it doesn't go away. It's like a piece of salt. It's manufactured into a crystal. So that crystal meth just sits there until it's removed. So people are usually shocked when they find out there's meth in their house when they're on that selling side of the transaction.
Yeah, little grandma has a positive meth test, and she's like, what?
Exactly. Yeah. And grandpa houses are they're really high percentage risk houses because they have lots of room. I mean, the room
that's where people go.
Yeah, and there's plenty of room with them.
Right.
I go, the house I'm in right now, when I was raising my 6 kids, it wasn't big enough. And today I have six beds and 3 baths, and I go around flushing toilets because there's 2 of us.
Right.
And so it's like, if I had a grandkid come, it's easy to go, sure, honey, I got your back. We'll get you back on your
things
feet.
happen.
Yeah.
Your leg up.
Yeah. And it's
That's what you're supposed to do.
Exactly. We do a ton of that. We help each other out here in Utah. And
right, especially Utah. Utah definitely has a helping hand mentality.
Yeah. And I don't want to give that up either. I love
No.
that, you know, we help each other. We're all going to be recipient of that bring your shovels and sandbag call within the next month, right? Because we help each other out and we do that. And the bad news is that is what I find is that seller, when they're kind of doing the mental gymnastics after they find out there's meth in their house, then they're
Right.
going, how did that get here? And almost always they figure it out. It's, oh shoot, my spouse, I divorced him 6 years ago, but I didn't
Right.
know. Or whatever it is, they
And
generally
my
know.
grandson stayed here for 3 months.
Right. Yeah. Or anybody, they figure out where it's come from. And in some cases, and Rob, this happens to me every week in my company. At least one of my clients bought their problem because they didn't do a meth test.
Mm.
So I'm kind of a fanatic about when you're out there having your home inspector do your home inspection during due diligence.
Right.
Pay for a meth test, for heaven's sakes. Even
Right.
though, I mean, if you went with the 1 in 3 number, which is kind of high
Yeah.
in my world, but even 1 in 3, 66% are going to come back fine. So I think it's easy as a realtor to go, oh, I don't need to test this house that looks really good, or not this house. And for me, I'm like, test, because when they go to sell it in 5 years, 7 years,
That guy
they don't want
test.
to find out about it then.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot easier to get it fixed when you're before you move in.
Exactly. And generally the bill isn't on you either. You buy the
Right.
problem, now you own the problem.
Right.
And when the next buyer comes
Yeah,
in,
no extra charge. It's your problem.
yep. Yeah.
So speaking of which, I mean, so excuse me. So, I mean, if it's so the level, so and I always forget which one it is. So, but 1.0 and under is considered positive, but 1.1 and above is considered contaminated, correct?
Correct. Yes, you can have meth in houses that is under the legal limit.
Right.
And in fact, I clear houses with the health department every day,
Right.
leaving traces of meth. And I trust the health people that go, 1 microgram is good and safe and not a problem. And I would put my own grandkids in any house we've decontaminated.
Right.
I
Right.
no energy on that at all. So yeah, what I do is I kind of put it in a dollar format just because it's less. I mean, saying 1 microgram per 100 square centimeters.
Yeah, whatever that. Yeah.
Heavy. Yeah, that doesn't mean anything.
First of all, I don't do metric.
Right. I know. I'm East Elementary here.
Right.
So if I can go, think of it like you can have $1 worth of meth per 100 square
So
centimeters.
you're meaning in size, not in street quantity for what do I get for $1?
Right. And 1 microgram is about 1/1,000,000th of a popcorn kernel. It's just not that much. It really isn't. But there's a template that is provided by the lab, and it's 100 square centimeters, so it's about 4 inches by 4 inches.
Right.
And so that template, when they swab that, there has to be $1 worth of meth or less, so 1.00 or under, and it could be no detect in lot R.
Right.
But if it's 1.01 or higher, then it requires some decontamination, whether it's just
requires by law. So 1.0 and under, it's not required by law, but you still have a house that, positive, it's not.
Correct.
Because the difference between 1.0 and 1.01, I mean, is so minuscule that.
Right.
Really. I mean, how's that line in the sand get drawn,
Yeah, I go, they just drew it and I just have to follow it.
Right.
So consequently, when a house is 1.01, the health department requires us to test every single room individually, which gets pretty expensive. So if a house has, 4 bedroom, 2 bath, there's 6 tests and a kitchen, an appliance.
Right, living room, a family
room. Yeah, I go, you can easily have
12, 14 tests.
Yeah. And so when I'm required to do that, when I get a 1.01, or something really low like that, most of the time I'll find that it's not in any of the rooms and it's just in the HVAC system.
Right.
What can happen is if, let's say, my Aunt Susie came and stayed with me 3 years ago, and she was doing really well, and I helped her out, but I know that's where, or at least that's where I believe my meth came from. In that time, how many times have I washed my walls? Or maybe I've even repainted the room or put new, if I've remodeled the house to sell it in today's market, I go, last year you didn't have to remodel anything.
No, right.
In today's market, you have to stand out. So you remodel everything, and you can, just by virtue of normal house cleaning, you can decontaminate, because that's what you're doing, is washing
Or at
away
least
everything.
lower it.
Yeah.
Well, decontaminate meaning bring it under the limit.
Right. And if there's a little bit of meth on the walls and I'm washing the walls down before I put a coat of paint on them,
Right.
I'm removing that meth.
Right.
But we just need to make sure it gets handled. But generally on those lower numbers, I do go in and pre-test the rooms, because I'm not a fan of decontaminating a whole house, which maybe only needs a room or two.
Right.
And so when I go in on a house, to your point of that line in the sand, one that's 1.01,
Right.
I'm required to test it. And then I have clients that get like a 0.99, and they're like, well, what if it's throughout the house? And I can at least say, with assurance and knowledge of the houses that I do, and we've done over 1,300 houses, so it's just percentages, but I go, 90% of the time when I get a number that's just barely over the legal limit, 90% of the time it's only going to be in the HVAC system.
Right.
And we could do that then. And so
See what happens, right? You
yeah.
gotta do that and then see.
Yep. Yeah. So the pre-test helps us know where to go next.
Right.
But it is an interesting arbitrary line, and they draw it and I trust it, and we'll work with it.
Well, you had to pick the number somewhere.
Yep.
So my understanding is we're greater than, I forget those. I thought it was like we're better. Our number, like California had a lower tolerance number and Colorado had a higher one or something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So Colorado's number is 0.50, so like 50 cents.
Right.
California's is 1.5.
Right.
So like $1.50, and ours is 1.0. So it seems like theirs is higher, but they don't allow for a composite test. So when I'm clearing a room, I test somewhere on the ceiling, the wall, and the floor. So I'm testing 3 areas. And so they take my total amount of meth or whatever's on my sample and divide it by 3, and that average has to be under 1.0.
Right.
In California, you test 1 area, and that area has to be 1.5 or below. So it's kind of interesting, because I could test a wall and have it be nothing, and the ceiling could be 1.2 and the floor could be 0.3.
Right.
So each of the states kind of have different standards that they.
Right. So it looks like Utah just said, well, they're 0.5, they're 1.5, we'll go 1.
I think what they did is probably 20 years ago, when they were setting up a lot of this nationwide, and they were dealing with more meth labs then, and that's how our standard came to be, was based on the labs. They went, what do we have to get it down to consider it safe?
Right.
Not what level do we want, what is the upper level, but what is the level we need it down to before we say, yep, you can have people in there.
Right.
And so that's kind of where it started. And then about 5 years ago, the health department in Utah, they rechecked that, and basically they were fine with 1 microgram per 100 square centimeters is what they believe is the maximum safe amount for an infant on a daily basis. And that's where our number came from. So it's based upon some science that makes sense. And for me, I go, if it was a lab and it was 1,000 times over the legal limit, I have to get it under 1. Well, if it's a house that's had a lot of smoking in it, that's an 88, doesn't it make sense that I'll get that under 1.2 or a 4? Let me get it under 1.
Yeah, what are you gonna do, right?
Yeah. Yep. So we just get them all there.
Yeah, get them all under 1 and we'll be good, right?
Yep.
Remember
Yeah.
you mentioned something about that the smoke is heavy, so it falls, right? Didn't you say that?
Yeah. So in that vapor, when somebody is smoking meth, eventually gravity takes everything down. And there's baby teeny tiny crystal meth in that vapor. So really wherever that vapor lands, you've got small
Contamination.
amounts of meth landing. And then what it does is it sticks to the oily surface that we live in. And
Right.
kind of an example of that oily surface is if my hands are filthy dirty and I've been working in my garden and I go put my hand against the wall and I pull my hand back, my dirty handprint will be there, right?
Right.
It's
So that's
just
where the meth's gonna stick to.
yeah, it's just sticking to the oily surface.
So if
It's
you
just
walk around your house with bare feet, guess what? It's all gonna stick to it.
yeah, yeah. But washable floors get washed how often?
Right,
Right? If you have kids and pets, you're washing them all the time and it's never clean.
right.
And then you know, you seem about my age, so you know, I could be wrong, but I go, then you get to
We're
our age
both
where
29.
there you go. And all you do is have grandkids over and the house is always clean till the grandkids come over.
Right,
But nonetheless, washable floors get washed all the time.
right,
Bathrooms get washed often. Kitchens get washed not as often, but often. And bedrooms not that much, but they get remodeled from time to time. So you can have houses, it can just be there and you don't know where it's at. That's why we end up in most cases doing a full decontamination, because it's just high enough that you go, it's not productive to do all the pre-testing
right.
to risk, oh, I've spent all this money on pre-testing and then I find it's throughout the house. When I get the lower numbers, then it usually is worth doing, spending some money on pre-testing. As an example,
Right.
what's that?
Because if you do all the, if it makes sense to do the pre-testing, you can save on the cleaning.
Yes, yes, you absolutely. From my end, you'll save on that bill. But the bigger reason I look at it, and this is a house where we're actually just starting. We just started it today. This was a house completely remodeled, all new paint, all new carpet, all new LVT, everything. And it's pretty big. It's like a $1.8 million house. And that the HVAC system came back really, really high.
Wow.
But there's all this remodeling, and we had a little history of when it was likely introduced into the house. So we went in and we pre-tested all the rooms that had the new carpet in it. Because if it tests good, why throw away brand new carpet?
Right.
It's not there. So we went in and we pre-tested, and one of the rooms came back and failed. So we are throwing away one of the bedrooms carpet. But the other rooms are fine.
Right.
So we're decontaminating about half of that house. And same thing with the bathrooms. In this house, the bathrooms were 100% remodeled. New tile, new vanity, new bath surround, everything. So it's like, unless the contractor was in there smoking, it's not going to be in the bathrooms. So we can go in there and pre-test and go, no need to go in and risk bubbling paint.
Right.
Because we can bubble paint. So none of the bathrooms are we going to have to decontaminate because they're all fine. You know, so sometimes I can save the money that it costs for pre-testing in saving the carpet.
Right.
Or the paint bubbling. So
right.
I try to look at the whole picture and go, if this was my house, what would I do?
Right. So what's the process? So what's it like to clean? I mean, what do you clean it with? I mean, layman's term.
Yeah, right. This is really easy. We use the Apple Environmental Meth Remover, and you can get it right here in Salt Lake. It's manufactured.
Called Apple Environmental?
Apple Environmental Meth Remover. Mm-hmm. And you can get it.
Is that the same people to make the phones?
No, it's not. They probably wish they made that kind of money.
Yeah.
but there's two parts to it. And so it's called part one and part two. One part's a detergent where it's lifting the oily surface off the wall, right?
Right.
And the other part is kind of an oxidizer base where it's going to extract the meth out of the paint, neutralize it, and then the detergent's going to wash it off. So there's part A in a gallon jug, part B in a gallon jug. We mix those together and we put it on with a foamer. And well, I should tell you, day one, we call it our dry day. And that's where we take a great big HEPA vacuum in and we vacuum out all the duct lines, the supply lines, the cold air return.
Right.
We pull the drawers out of the cupboards and vacuum inside there. And we literally are vacuuming the whole house.
If you go in there with wet stuff, it's just mud.
Yeah, you got meth mud, and we do not want meth mud. Yeah. So day one is our dry day. Then day 2, 3, and 4, we're taking this Apple environmental meth remover and we put it on with a foamer. So we're foaming it onto the ceilings, the walls, the floors, the cupboards, drawers, Harry Potter closets, hallways, the furnace, the plenum, the supply lines. We're foaming it everywhere. And then we kind of agitate it. And we do this for 3 days. Then on the 5th business day, because you've got day 1, which is dry, day 2, 3, and 4, we're scrubbing with our decontamination solution. Day 5, we rinse it down with fresh rinse water. And we do a wet dry vac. So we're vacuuming up all the wet each day, but we want it moist in there. And so it's a 5-day process for us to decontaminate. Then, and this is general. Then on the 6th business day, we're going to test with the health department. It's 4 business days to get those test results back. So it's about a 2-week process, even though it only takes us a week to do our work.
Right. I know like the home inspectors, they do like a 1 day or they pay for a rush.
Yeah. And I can, and I've had to do it. Right. I go,
if they're sitting in a hotel, let's make it a rush.
Well, and generally in the real estate transaction, we try to work it for when the sellers are moving out. But there are times when a buyer has a rate lock deadline and there's no line, there's a hard line in the sand. You know that one, right? So there's times when we've had to overnight the test. But if you have 15 tests at an additional $45 a test, and that's what ALS charges for their overnight fees, that's if at 15, $600, $700, yeah. And so
additional, that's additional.
Yes. I go, it doesn't, no heartburn on my end to rush tests or do regular, because my work
as long as you want to pay for it.
Yeah. But most of the time they don't want to pay that extra $700 in rush, and I get it. And there's been times when we've done it. There's been times we've done same day testing, which is really expensive, but it just depends on what the deal needs.
So you send it out of state or no?
Nope. Actually, ALS Lab, they probably do 80% of the meth testing in the nation. And we've got them right here in Salt Lake, which is awesome. They have
you can just run it right over there if you want.
Yeah, they're right off 45th South. And Interlink Supply that sells that Apple Environmental, they're right off 45th South. So they're both really close.
So that's like Meth Highway, right?
45th South off of I-15. Yeah, I assume everybody's from here, but it's on the west side of it's in Taylorsville.
Right.
And yeah, and it's right there and it's easy. So if I was in testing a house in St. George, I couldn't do a same day test.
Right.
I mean, there's just no way I could do that. And so consequently,
so we have that luxury here in Salt Lake.
Yes. Yep, you do. Yep.
Oh, wow. So I wanted to circle back where we talked about, where eventually gravity takes over.
Yeah.
So even if you have a small number, it's most likely on the floor, right?
I don't know. That's the tricky part, because here's the funny thing with meth. I don't know what room they were smoking in.
Right.
If it's washable floor, I'm going to assume it's been cleaned up.
Right.
So, and excuse me, if I'm pulling carpet and pad, then it's probably not going to be under the carpet and pad. So I make the assumption actually just the opposite.
Well, I'm talking, where I was headed toward, Dan, was, you know, if you get a, you know, it's like 0.5, no big deal, right? It's not contaminated. It's a low number.
Right.
But if it's on the floor and you got babies, I mean, you could have a problem.
Yep. And that's why we do every inch of every house. Because I go, I don't want to worry about, well, was it in this room and not in that room? Well,
You're right.
this doesn't look like a creepy room. I'm sure they didn't smoke in here. We just do it all because I don't want to worry.
Right.
So it can be anywhere. The cold air return, most of our houses along the Wasatch Front and even in Utah are forced air furnace systems.
Right.
And so radiant heat, none of this matters. But in a forced air furnace house, the cold air return sucks 70% of the air in every house. So if I'm smoking in the bedroom and you're smoking in the bathroom and somebody else is smoking in the kitchen, the cold air return is pulling air from all of those rooms, sending it to the
And
furnace.
distributing everywhere.
Yes. So what you have in houses is generally some hotter rooms versus some not so hot rooms. But again, it doesn't make sense in most cases to go
So when you
test
say
them.
hot versus not hot, you're talking about the contamination level.
Right, right. I'm sorry.
Because you're
That was
talking
a
about air
lot of
conditioning and you said hot. I'm like, oh,
No, I'm sorry. I was
I wanted
talking
to make, yeah.
humanity.
I just wanted to be clear. Yeah.
Yeah, my bad slang. I'm
Oh,
sorry
yeah.
about that.
You got your shop talk, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, one different levels of contamination, just like this, room that we had one room, or generally it's higher in the room that they're smoking. That is
Right.
where it's introduced. But the cold air return generally tests the highest because it's pulling from everywhere each
Right.
time.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's also like if it's in a room, it's dissipating. Where if it's in the cold air, it's concentrated
Yes. Yep.
in one spot. It hits that back wall and it's
Yep. Yep. Exactly. So that gives us a good idea of, has it been introduced into this house or not? Because
right.
that's what a home inspection test is, gosh, sorry, I didn't turn my phone off on silent. My bad.
Mm.
But typically a home inspector test is a pre-test.
Right.
And we do some pre-testing, but again, a pre-test job is to go, is it here or is it not?
Right.
Has it been introduced into this house or has it not? So that cold air return gives us a good idea. And if the house doesn't have central air or hasn't since the life of that house, it's only running 6 months of the year. So if
right.
my Aunt Susie comes in and lives with me for the summer and I don't have central air, that cold air return is going to show nothing. So it's not the only place to do a pre-test, but it's always a great one to include. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, it's always one of my 3 or 4 areas.
Sure, always. Sure. And so you said it takes about 10 days unless you pay for, you can do it in like possibly 7 or 8.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if it's a smaller area, let's say you figured out it's only these 2 rooms, it still takes the same amount of days. It just doesn't take you all day.
Right. Right. Because it needs
you still have to go through the steps.
Yeah. Yeah. So some of the times when we get smaller jobs, we can go start.
You can do a dry and
one
a wet
treatment on in the morning, go to our second house, and then come back and do a third treatment on our way back to the shop. And that can happen on occasion if we're doing work out of town, because we cover the whole state of Utah. We've done jobs in California and Nevada and Idaho.
Oh, wow.
And I don't prefer to go out of state.
All right.
But
increase your cost.
Yeah, it does.
Hotels and such.
Yeah, but when we're down in St. George or Moab, we're doing motels, and they will put on 2 treatments in a day. One in the morning, give it the dwell time. I don't know if they go swimming all day or golfing. Well, I do know. I'm sure that they do both of those things.
Right.
And then they go back and put a treatment on in the evening, and then it has all night for dwell time, and then they put a third treatment on the next morning. So sometimes we can do it faster.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned something about a hotel. I wonder if I wonder you know, if a hotel ever.
Don't even go down that rabbit trail. Don't even go there.
Yeah, you know, some of them hotels in Vegas, you need to strip that whole place out of there, you know?
Yeah, they did this was probably and now it's probably 6 or 7 years ago, but they tested a motel, and it was a nice high-end motel in Hollywood area, and every room came back positive. And then I go, it probably is very, very high, even in our motels here, even in our Airbnbs. I go, people are partying still. We just in our party
Vegas? You
days,
think in
in our
Vegas they're
teenagers.
partying?
I know, right? They're doing it here.
Right.
And so I go, yeah, rentals, Airbnbs, motel rooms, they're probably higher percentage. They're probably higher than 1 in 3.
Right.
That's been my experience.
Well, like you said,
Just
then granny houses are kind of like actually a high percentage, you know, and
they
it's
are.
like that's like, you know, and I've always, you know, personally, I've always bought granny houses, you know, the
Yep.
houses I've lived in, you know, because I love them, you know. I was,
Yeah.
you know, like I have wallpaper and stuff. It's like I always say, you know, the roof's dry, the furnace is hot, and the roses are pretty. After that, you're on your own, you know.
Right. Right.
But they're always in mint condition.
Yes, because they take good care of them.
Yeah,
And then
and they're not wrecking.
no, but you walk down into the basement of grandma's house, and sometimes they look different than the upstairs.
Oh yeah,
Right. And you go, oh, they just haven't kept up down here. And it's true, right?
right,
The knees give out and the back gives out, and they bring in the meth kid or grandkid and go, look, you take care of my yard, and you can take, you can live in the basement. You just bring up my laundry. And they never walk down there and don't know the train wreck that's down there.
right. Yeah, yeah. That's a shame. You know, you got a little old lady and finding out she's got a meth house. You know.
Yeah. And honestly, Rob, there is no point in time I'm not doing a grandma grandpa house.
Hmm.
I always have one going. They're super high percentage houses.
Isn't that
When,
interesting? I mean, it
yeah, when
makes
people
sense. It makes
go,
sense why.
yeah, but we don't think of that when we're
No,
thinking of,
right. Yeah, when you're looking at houses, you know, how could this be a meth house? You know.
yeah, yeah. And it's like, think of the house that's helped somebody out. Then there's no house that's off the table,
Right.
because there's so many of
Yeah,
us that will
siblings.
help out.
Yeah, they have 5 brothers and sisters. They went through all them before they got homeless. You know.
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
They got parents, and then if you have divorced parents, and then you have 2 houses,
Yep.
5
Yep.
siblings, there's 7, 2
Yep.
grandparents, there's 9.
Yep. And
Yeah,
then after they kick you out, you might have a parent that goes, let me put you in a rental for a minute.
right,
Then you get on your feet. Or you do really good, and then you get married, and then you start, every not every married, but I assume most married couples, they start out in a rental, and then they get their first starter house,
right,
and they move on to the next one. And maybe that cycle is going on, that you go, they're doing great until they don't. And you probably know people like this, and I do too, and the people that are listening to this podcast, we all know people that are struggling or have struggled with meth or drugs.
right,
And it's like, you assume they're doing good and you're cheering for them all the time, but you don't know what house they've smoked in when they've had that rough day.
right. Yeah,
With somebody quitting smoking, you go, oh, I can tell you had a rough day. When you come home from work, honey, you smell a little bit like a Marlboro. But you don't know that with meth.
right. Doesn't have a smell,
Nope. Nope. There is not an odor. You would not know it.
huh? Right. Yeah, yeah. Smoker's house, you know, cigarette smoke. I mean, you smell from the car, you know, before
Yep.
you.
Yep. You can. You can. And with a meth house, you would just not. It is amazing the number of beautiful, beautiful houses that Ann Atkin, I prejudge them, and I'm like, no way, this is way too nice.
Right.
In my core, I'm just like, no, we have first world problems. Why would you resort to that? And I think nice houses shouldn't have it. It's just the way I was
Right.
brought up, right? And I do way more nice houses than what I think about a meth house, the
Right.
skungy, nasty ones. It is so often in those nice houses. And that's where I go, yeah, they're helping somebody out. It's usually not the homeowners, although sometimes it is.
It is,
but
right.
but
But
usually,
they're more apt to be, they're more in a position to help people.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So that's why
Man.
I'm a test every house every time. If you're buying a house, just have your home inspector do a test. It just makes sense.
Yeah, I remember in the class, that was one of those statements you just pounded home. Test every house every time. Test every house every time.
It hurts me when I have a client who bought their problem and they're just
Right.
like, I didn't know. And I go, probably most of them didn't, because meth is not easy on a transaction. It's not fun. It's not fun to push back a closing.
Right.
And I think there's plenty of people that are like, if you don't bring up a test, I'm not going to either, because it's 10 times easier on the transaction. And I also
Yeah.
believe there's a lot of real estate agents that don't even know, that have that same belief. I'll know a meth house when I see it. And they just
Yeah,
don't
right.
know better.
Yeah, you have
So,
this perception of a,
yeah,
rundown house,
yeah.
Now,
So I
hopefully
don't
this,
know that.
yeah, hopefully this podcast will reach enough agents to start educating them.
I hope so. I hope so, because I go, once you do the test, even if it's a no detect, at least you know you haven't bought a problem.
Oh yeah, that's the best news you can get.
Yeah. Yeah. Versus I've got my house up for sale now today, and I'm really ticked off that I didn't have it up for sale a year ago, because I've already lost 100 grand in
Right.
equity. And now
And
I've
last year you wouldn't have
remodeled
had to,
my house, and now I have to do a meth cleanup. Are you kidding me?
yeah, last year you wouldn't have had to do a meth cleanup. They'd be like, buyers, like,
Oh,
okay, just
yeah, it
knock
was really
$12
funny.
off, we'll take it.
Last year, which was an abnormal market, I had actually more buyers paying for the decontamination,
Right,
because it was cheaper to pay for us to decontaminate
then
than
to
to do
find
it
another
for
house.
non-refundable earnest money.
Right.
Everything was non-refundable, and I had a lot of buyers paying for it, and it's okay. We'll do it. Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Let's just get it done.
I mean, so say a typical 2,100 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2 house. I mean, is there like an average price? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, it's okay. And I go, it's my today's minimum. So I
Right.
can do about 2,000 square feet and under, and 2,100. I go, I can fudge up to that, but my minimum is 48.95.
Okay, so
And that's with the
4,895.
Wasatch Front. Yeah, it's almost 5. And that's going to include the permit with the local health department, whether it's, Salt Lake County, Davis County, Tooele, Weber, Morgan. We don't do drugs down here in Utah County, so that's off the table. But that includes the permitting, all the testing, guaranteed pass on everything for that $4,900. And as inflation moves up, that price will probably go up. But I can do about any house 2,000 square feet or less for that price. And if we find it's HVAC system only, and we've done some pre-testing, generally that's 3,500-ish by the time we do the pre-test. We still have a $400 permit fee, whether it's a HVAC decontamination or a whole house. And so it's a little bit less expensive. But that's kind of my minimum. So if you have 1,000 square foot house, same price, because I'm mobilizing on
You
site.
still have that, yeah.
Yeah.
There's an economy of scales. I mean, it's the same
Yeah.
kind of work from 1,000 to 2,000.
Yeah. And
The carpet, so if you're doing the rooms with carpet, so the carpet has to go, right?
Carpet has to go. Yeah.
Well, anything cloth, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So if they've got fabric blinds,
right, fabric drapes,
or the 1-inch blinds are going to go to anything that's permeable.
Because they got all the strings in it, the little blinds.
Yep.
So it has to be a good solid surface. What about like leather couches too? No, yeah.
They go. Can't decontaminate them because they're permeable. It's all that padding.
Once it goes through the leather, it's in the padding, yeah.
Yeah. And you just don't know. That's the tricky part. Is I go, I can test it, but how do I decontaminate that? I mean, that is one soggy, it just gets tricky. So usually in the real estate transaction, the sellers do whatever they want to do with their stuff. And most of the time we're just hauling out carpet pad
Right.
cleans, and and the sellers can decide what they want to do with their
Yeah,
stuff.
they could throw their furniture away or not, you know,
Yeah, because they know generally when that meth was introduced in there. So
and
let's
where it
say,
might be, right?
right, if I bought a house 2 years ago and I didn't do a meth test, and I know darn good and well that it didn't happen on my watch, well,
Yeah, you don't know. Now you don't know, have no idea.
I think I've got a pretty good idea it's not on my couch, because if it's
Oh, because you brought your couch in.
right,
Right,
right.
right,
So
right.
my
Now
stuff that
I
I
got you.
bring
Yeah, you're
in,
right.
it's not going to jump off the walls onto it. But if you go, oh, hang on, Joey was here last summer and I'm pretty sure he brought it in, then you know what's possibly contaminated. So from the health department standpoint, they assume if a room or a house is over the legal limit, then everything in there is probably over the legal limit. So
Well, yeah, you have to be better, you know, better safe than sorry, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Well, this is it's quite fascinating, Ann. I mean, and interesting to say the least, you know.
Yeah, yeah. A crazy interesting, right? The
Yeah,
cure would be a lot better if we didn't have to deal with it at all. But
right,
meanwhile,
right. Yeah. So let me ask you this: is there anything I'm not asking we should know?
hmm, um, there's well, two things. We've already pounded the one to death, but I'll always say it: test every house every time. Get your home
Right.
inspector to test your house. But then the other thing I would say is, don't allow somebody to bring in another home inspector to retest. They aren't allowed to clear a house. The only people that can clear a house are certified decontamination specialists. So a home inspector does not override a home inspector. Once you've got a positive test,
Right.
then let's deal with it and get it handled. But so just be careful about who you're hiring to do your clearance work.
Right.
There's only about 28 people in the state that are authorized to do it.
I see. So
But other than
once you
that,
have it,
no.
once you're positive or contaminated, then you know obviously only certain people can clear it, like you said.
Yes. Yeah.
Even
Yep.
though the home inspector could probably do it, you know, but they're not certified, so therefore it doesn't count.
Right. Right. And so it's got to
I
be
mean, not all of them.
certified.
Some of them are not. Some of them aren't that bright, but some of them are really good.
That is the absolute truth. I go, some home inspectors, I go, I know they're using the template. I know they're doing a great job. Other home inspectors go in and swab the whole inside of the furnace. And in fact, I just had one of those where the home inspector tested it 10 times over the legal limit. We went in there and we could see they had wiped the whole inside. And so we used our template and we tested right beside all their swab marks. And you know, in a furnace, they're pretty dirty. So you can see where somebody's wiped.
Right.
And we put our template in there. We got a 0.55. So a home inspector shows it over the limit because they don't use a template, but they report, I only tested 100 square centimeters, but they have no idea how much they tested because they didn't use a template. So,
Right.
so home inspectors are great for, is it in this house or is it not?
Right. And that's the end of their area of expertise.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like when they go in and they go, your furnace isn't working. Do you want them tinkering with your furnace, or do you want to get a furnace professional?
Right. Yeah, right.
So think of meth like that. If something's not working,
It's just
that's
another
when you
area of
call in a
expertise.
professional. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, this has been uh quite interesting to say the least. I mean, this is, you know, I've had, you know, a myriad of guests, you know, different topics. I try to cover a wide range of topics, and this is definitely one out there in its own direction all by itself.
Right. It kind of is. Nobody's ever talking about meth over the lunch table.
No, at the dinner table, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, did you make any meth today, son? You know.
Yeah. I know. Right. Right.
So, well, that's fascinating stuff. So, well, thanks. So, Ann, how does somebody get a hold of you if they want to? So, I mean, I'm assuming somebody could call you up if they had questions or anything.
Sure. So on our website, we actually have, and it's just www.methmob.com.
Methmob.com. Okay.
Methmob.com, and that has a thing where you can request a free estimate. You
Oh,
can just
wow.
put in your information, and we provide free estimates. If they want to call the office, 801-318-1583.
Okay.
And my cell is 801-722-5013. And we can, every conversation is not a sell. I don't want people to ever be afraid to call me to get information, because meth is just kind of a creepy subject, and I can help navigate them through it. And plenty of our phone calls at the office and to my cell are going, you're fine, 0.55, go live your best life, right? Nothing needs to be sold on, well, how about this? Every phone call doesn't need to be sold. Every phone call needs somebody comforted in my world.
Well, and that's it too. I mean, yeah, it is an issue, but to me, it's always not like, what is the issue? To me, it's like, well, how much does it cost?
Right. How do we solve it? How do we solve it?
If it's a $5,000 item, well, in a $500,000 transaction, it's pretty small.
Right. But it's still painful when you're counting on that $5,000 in your house.
Right.
And
yeah. And well, maybe you got to tear out the carpet, then it starts that up quick.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah.
But anyway, well, again, this is awesome. Thanks.
Thank you for having me on, Rob. I sure appreciate it.
Oh, no, it was great hanging out with you. I enjoyed it. I really did. And so, thanks for coming in with Meth Mob-Decontamination Specialist. And then the other word we struggle with is recidivism. Is that it? Yeah, I did it. Well,
you're on it. You must have had your Red Bull today.
Yeah, that one just like when I stop and think about it, then I can't even do it,
I know. Just let it roll out natural.
Yeah. Exactly.
Natural knowing will help you.
If you stop to think about your phone number, you can't do it. If you just puke it out, it just comes right out.
It's so true. So true.
So, well, thanks anyway, folks. My name's Rob Aubrey. This is Productive Agent podcast. It's powered by Aubrey Home Loans. So thank you for joining us today. And if you have any questions, just reach out to us.